Sophie Podcast episode 254, take 1. Hello, this is Sophie Lawson from sophielawson.com and this is episode 254 of the Sophie Art Podcast, which is a little podcast I do about the art and tings with me co-host lilDENNiS. And lilDENNiS is here with us today. Now this one's going to be brilliant. Well, I don't know if it's going to be, this one's going to be very interesting because this one I'm going to talk about the mind. I'm going to talk about what I thought is, I'm going to call it the mind during my mind during human interactions and conversations. So let's get into this one. lilDENNiS is going to get us straight in. Woohoo! So lilDENNiS and Kitty, there we are. We've had our kitty kisses. So lilDENNiS and Kitty in their house. So this one, I think this one could get a little bit, I'm a little bit scared I suppose about doing this one. I'm scared but also excited. I've got a feeling that this one I might get like a revelation or something. That's what I'm hoping, because what I've noticed is, if you talk about things that you're struggling with, when you talk about it, it sort of helps you. Whereas if you sort of keep it inside, it doesn't. It sort of gets even stronger. But I've got loads of notes for this one. I was going to try and make this one have no notes, but I thought, well, I've got just so much to say. I'm going to talk about things like, because when I'm in a conversation with somebody, I feel like there's like these multiple awarenesses. I'm focusing on the conversation, but there's also like the thoughts are trying to pull away my focus, so it is quite distracting. And I do see it as like some like forces, and so I'm going to get into that. It's like multiple awarenesses, and then I'm also going to talk about some of the voices. See, I don't know if it's voices or thoughts, but what it is there's these thoughts. I get these thoughts whilst I'm in a conversation. It's very much like an anxiety thing, and it's to do with, well, I've always thought it's to do with social anxiety, but I'm wondering whether in actual fact what's happening is you're actually picking up other people's thoughts. So I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about well, what it is it's like, it's almost like there's a part of me that is trying, even right now as I'm doing this podcast, there's a part of me that is trying to distract me, take me off course. So what happens is, I'm having a conversation or trying to do something, and there's like something pulling me. The way I've always visualised it is, it's like you're on a tightrope, you're trying to get across this tightrope, and somebody's like throwing tomatoes or something at you, so like you're losing your balance. But if you stay focused on the tightrope, you can get across. But it's very easy to get distracted by these like tomatoes. So these thoughts that are in my head, I see them as like these tomatoes. That's just how I've sort of thought about it. And then the big question is, why does it even matter if somebody doesn't like me? And then I'm also going to go into like a base level anxiety and trying to work out where does this base level anxiety come from? Because I do think a lot of people have got this. That's another thing. Like, I think, is it society? Has society created like a base? Is society based on anxiety, basically? Something like that. And then I've got these various moments in my life where I'm trying to work out if that's where this anxiety has come from. So I'm going to talk about that, and I'm also going to talk about something, a big realisation. Well, I think it was yesterday, because I've been thinking about this podcast for a couple of days, and I've been trying to sort of be more aware at work whilst I'm doing things, so I can sort of try to work out why I'm doing certain things. And one of them is, See, I'm a very hard worker, and like I really focus when I'm at work. I focus on my work, and what I've noticed is I think that's a form of avoiding anxiety. In other words, I'm so focused on my work, I don't have to think about. Because what happened yesterday? Yeah, yesterday what happened was I found myself at work in a situation where I'd finished work, but I had to wait in order to clock off on the machine. And for that 15 minutes, I was so anxious, and that's when I thought to myself, basically, if I'd been working, I would have been fine. Because I had nothing to do, what was happening was all these thoughts that was in my head, instead of being focused on working, I started focusing on these thoughts, and you can also see it as like a fishing hook or something. If you it's like the thoughts are like little baits on a fishing hook. Yeah. So most of them, if I'm focusing on working, all these baits are just going around, and probably what happens is the fisherman takes his thing out and throws it back in. But if I've not got nothing to do, what'll happen is I'll start paying attention to one of these thoughts, and that's when it grabs me. So that's another thing. So, and I've also got this other thing where I was thinking, I'd love to be able to go inside. Sometimes I think I'd love to be able to go inside other people's heads, just to see what they were. In other words, I'd like to have a conversation with somebody, and somehow be able to go into the other person's head as I'm having a conversation, so I could actually see what they're thinking. Because I'd be interested if the thought that I've got in my head is the same as the thought that they're thinking. So in other words, I'd like to prove whether the thoughts that are in my head, which are negative, whether they're real or not. So if I go right back to the beginning, so what happens is when I'm in conversations with people, what'll happen is I'll be having especially if there's loads of people. Yeah, what happens is if I'm having a conversation one-to-one with somebody, it's not that bad. If there's another person, what happens is my attention starts going on the other person, and I start thinking, well, again, it's all thoughts. A thought will come in saying that other person's thinking that you shouldn't be talking to that person. It's saying really, some of the stuff it says is really horrible. It says stuff like, I'm having a conversation with somebody, and there's these thoughts in my head saying, that person doesn't like you. Or it says stuff like, you're looking at them funny. Yeah. In other words, and then what happens? So I know what happens. The thought comes in and says, I'm looking at them funny. So then I start paying attention to that thought, which means then I'm now going to start looking at them funny. So in other words, I can see what's happening. The thought comes in, and if you pay attention to it, you actually end up making that thought real. Because another thing I've said is I'm constantly looking for signs to prove that they don't like me. Yeah. In other words, if I'm talking to somebody and a thought comes in and it says that they don't like me, what happens is I'll start looking at that person, trying to find little cues in their facial expressions or something, almost to sort of trying to prove that the thought is real. But the other thing is, I've said this so many times, with art, what it teaches you with art is, it shows you when you learn about negative shapes, which is the space between objects, and the best way to do it is with your fingers. The space between your fingers, these little triangles, they are their own shape. So what happens is you can when you're drawing, you can either focus on the finger, try to draw the finger, but because you think you know what a finger looks like, if you're trying to draw a finger, you will end up not drawing what you're looking at, you'll end up drawing what you think a finger looks like. Whereas if you draw the shapes next to it, you'll end up drawing the finger much more accurately, which is like a paradox, because you draw it more accurately by not looking at the thing you're trying to draw, which is weird. But the same thing's happening here with, in other words, I think it's the same, but a bit, it might be, what happens is the thought comes in that they don't like you, so you start looking at them, looking for cues that they don't like you, so that you can sort of confirm that thought. Well, what I was thinking was, what if you, see, what you need to do is, it's easier said than done, but what you need to do is, when that thought comes in and says they don't like you, what you could do is create your own thought saying, they do like me. Or you could just say, it doesn't matter whether they like me or something. So in other words, like there's a for me it feels like some sort of, it's a psychological, it feels like a battle, a psychological thing here, which is weird. This is why I'd like to go into their thoughts. If I could go into the other person's thoughts, if the thought that had come into my head saying something like that they don't like me, if they were thinking that, I'd be alright with that. Because again, it doesn't matter whether they like me or not. But if they wasn't thinking that, then I would know that the thought is a lie. But then the other thing is, does it really matter what is... That's it. You can't control what the other person's thinking about you. And it does seem a little bit like you can't control what thoughts are coming in. The only thing you can control is the thought that you create in that moment. So, like, can you see how quite sort of confusing this is? Because you're trying to have a conversation with somebody, but you've got this... It's, in a strange way, it's almost like you've got two parts of you. There's one part of you that's having a conversation, and then there's this other part that's trying to process all of these thoughts and everything. And I think to myself, I was like thinking to myself, is the other person, when I'm having a conversation with somebody, is the other person thinking, like, Sophie's looking at me funny, or is the other person thinking I'm looking at Sophie funny or something? So, like, who knows whether actually everyone's doing the same thing? Yeah, but what I was thinking was, so, like, I'm in the middle, and there's a conversation, and then on the other side is the thoughts. So what happens is, I'm focusing on the conversation, which is like the finger. The thoughts are like the negative space. So what happens is, I'm trying to focus on the finger, the conversation, but all of these thoughts are coming in. So what happens is, my like, I see myself as like an awareness, really, and I control where I put my focus. So that's the thing, I am in control of it, but it sort of seems like you're not sometimes. So what happens is, like, I'm here in the middle, and I'm focusing on the conversation, but when the thought comes in, my focus goes over there. So what happens is, you can't fully focus on the conversation. So it is a bit like a form of a meditation here. Yeah, but what I'm also thinking is, in the old days, like in the proper old days, what was happening was, I was in a conversation, these thoughts were coming in, I wasn't even aware of them. So what was happening was, the thought was coming in, and I was just becoming the thought. Yeah. So in other words, I would have then... So what happened in the old days was, I didn't even start conversations. I didn't even have conversations with people, because I just believed the thought straight away. So I didn't even... Whereas what's happening now is, I'm sort of... And I've been for a few years, I've been trying to improve my... I suppose it's like social skills or something. Because I do wonder as well whether when I was a child, it feels a bit like I missed the class when they were talking about social skills, like conversations or something. It's almost as if I missed the lecture on that one. I don't know why that is, but what was happening here? I lost my train of thought there. But it was talking about, I don't know. But, so the other thing here is, I've put multiple awarenesses. And I've put, if you're aware, this is the thing, see, the thought, I'm now aware of these thoughts. So if what I'm thinking to myself is, if I can be aware of this thought that says that they don't like you, if I can be aware of that thought, then it can't be my thought. Because how can you be aware of a thought? In other words, to be aware of a thought means it's not your thought. So that's another thing I've been thinking about. So what I was doing was I was trying to think about something, and if you try to think about something, you can't think about the thought as you're thinking it. In other words, if it's a thought that you're thinking, you're fully thinking. And if it's another thought, if it's someone else's thought, you've still got your sort of, I would call it like an awareness or something. In other words, you can be aware of thoughts that aren't your own. So even that's quite an interesting sort of observation, I suppose. But the main thing here, and I've put a big red box around it on my notes. So one of the things is, basically, when I've thought about it, everything that is making me anxious is coming down to me wanting to be accepted, I suppose, and like caring what other people think about me. And I've put here, why does it matter if someone doesn't like you? And that's the main thing, really. Like, because when you think about it, it doesn't matter. So if it doesn't matter, like, I can see how this is all stupid, really. I can see how it's very, in other words, these thoughts, which I feel like they're trying to sabotage every time I'm having a conversation or something. These thoughts themselves it's just like a big illusion. They're making me be afraid of people not liking me when it doesn't matter anyway. And I know what the funny thing is. The funny thing is, I'm aware of the fact that I am probably making people a bit anxious around me because I'm feeling anxious. But what I know is that once you sort of, in other words, it might be that these thoughts which are saying things to say that they don't like you, because of the way I'm acting, I might actually be creating the thing that the thought is saying. Whereas if I can sort of get to a point where I don't believe the thought, that's what it all comes down to. I'm believing these thoughts. So if I can get to a point where the thought comes in and says they don't like you, and if I just say I don't care, in other words, the thought would go right through me, sort of thing. I know what will happen then. I'll be so relaxed around conversations that people will like me. Do you see what I mean? So it's almost like these thoughts are sort of self-fulfilling prophecies. And it makes me think a little bit about like the chicken and the egg. What comes first, the thought or the thing? This is why I try to look for signs, but maybe I should stop doing that as well. So the other thing I've put is like I've got a base level anxiety around people, and I've been trying to work out why is that. And I suppose another question is, why does it even matter? But for me, the sort of person I am, I'm somebody who likes to, for me, the thing that works best for me is to get right to the source of something. In other words, you can have an anxiety about something. You can sort of think you've overcome that anxiety, which has happened to me before. But what happens is you haven't actually gone deep enough into that anxiety to sort of really understand what's creating that anxiety. So it's almost like you've got like the anxiety is like a little flower or something. And what happens is you cut the flower head off and you think you've got rid of it, but the flower, the anxiety just grows back again. What you need to do is actually pull the whole root out. So this is why I like asking why. Like, why have I got a base level anxiety around people? So when I was 13 I got strangled. Did that create a fear of people? All through my life, as long as I can remember, I was transgender. I had a dad who was very much like very sort of aggressive towards gay people and people who are different. So did that create a fear of being different? I've also thought about, if you look into Divine Truth, which is this bloke he's called AJ on YouTube, YouTube. He talks about this thing where when you're born, you come into like the physical body, but what happens is your mum and dad, like anxieties from your mum and dad are sort of passed down into you. So it's almost like, the way you can look at that is, it's almost as if when you're born with base level anxieties from your parents, which I think the whole point of it is you've got these anxieties to try and help your mum and dad. That's what I'm thinking. Because what happens is you're going to bring to the surface all of your mum and dad's anxieties. Which again, like what I said at the start, the best way to sort of sort these things out is to talk about it. Well, if you've got your mums and dads, it's almost like you're custom built to create anxieties for your mum and dad, which is brilliant, but it goes the other way as well. Your mum and dad are custom built to create anxieties for you as well. So I do believe that like your mum and dad are probably the best people for one, working out where these anxieties are coming from, and also maybe they're going to be the best way to sort of I would say like heal them, but I don't think you need anyone else to heal it. You can heal it yourself. It reminds me of this other thing as well. I was listening to a podcast on the weekend. Synchronicity. I can't remember what it's called now. But he was talking about how what happened was when he started sort of working on himself, he noticed that he was starting to trying to sort of change other people. What happened was he started to notice, like in his mum, something that he knew wasn't good for her. So he started trying to change his mum. But what happened is, the more he tried to change his mum, the more she pushed back and said no, because she didn't want to change. So what happened was he stopped even trying. He continued healing himself, and then the funny thing was, a few years later, his mum had done the thing that he was trying to do. So he achieved the goal, not by trying to help his mum, but by helping himself. And I can't help but feel this is the same thing here. It's almost like what's happening here is, yes, I've got all these thoughts coming in, and I think I'm doing the right thing by being aware of them, but even just being aware of them is still, in other words, it's hard to explain this one. In other words, the thoughts coming in, and I think I'm doing the right thing by sort of letting the thought in, but I think I'm ignoring the thought, basically. Well, that's it. How do I explain it? In other words, the thought comes in and says, that person doesn't like you. I can latch onto it and say, and think that they don't like me, which will create probably the situation where they don't like me, even though it doesn't matter. Yeah. There's another one, which is where the thought comes in, you're aware of it, there's one where the thought comes in and you don't even notice it. It goes right through you. I think that's where you want to get to. So it's almost like you can still feel the thought there, but it's just going right through you. And I think I'm in this middle bit where the thought is coming in, and I think I'm not latching onto it, but it's not going right through me. It's almost like sticking to me. That's it. So instead of going right through me, it's just like sticking to me. So I'm having a conversation and the thought is still there. It hasn't gone right through me, basically. But I haven't catched onto it. So I think what I'm thinking is, if I can just focus on the conversation, then this is the hardest bit. Because when these thoughts come in, they feel so real. That's the thing. And because I'm not sure if the thought is real or not, it doesn't matter whether the thought is real or not. Yeah. All I've got to do is focus on the conversation. And I think if I focus on the conversation, the thought won't even be able to stick to me. That's what I'm thinking. But so the thing I've got here is this base level anxiety around people. One of them is being strangled. See, the other thing is, it might be a combination of all of this stuff. It might be that me mum and dad had these base level anxieties. I often wonder whether, this is just a thought I've had, did my dad have some sort of unresolved issue around his relationship with gay people? In other words, was he so sort of aggressive towards people that are different that it created a child, which was me, who was going to be different? And I sort of laugh because it is quite funny. It's almost like the universe is saying, look, you've got this issue, you're not working on it, so I'm going to bring into your life a child, so you have to face it. So maybe I was transgender to help my dad face like some issues or something. Me and my mum talk quite a lot about her childhood, and it does sound like there's a lot of anxiety, and there's definitely a lot of anxiety that hasn't been processed. So that must have gone into me as well. When I got strangled, that's got to have created some sort of fear around people. Because what happened was, after that, I changed schools, and that's when I started getting these panic attacks. Like my whole body would it was horrible. It was probably the worst period of my life, I think. What would happen is, I'd get the bus to school, a 30-minute ride. I'd get to school, I would be covered in sweat. It was horrible. So then I had to go the whole day at school. Basically, when I was a child, my whole life was spent sweating. But only when I was around people. When I was at home, I was fine. This is why I loved being on my own, playing video games and that. Because there was no anxiety then. It's a shame, really. But, well, I do think as well, if I didn't have video games in Formula 1, I feel like they saved my life. Because it allowed me to focus on something else. If I didn't have that, I don't know because what probably would have happened is I would have had, I'm not sure really. Because the other thing is, you could say maybe that was a bad thing to actually go home and spend your time playing video games. Maybe I should have been processing. The thing was, I didn't have anyone to talk to about this. I did end up going, because what happened was I went to college, and we had to, what happened was at college there was this one, I think it was English. I was retaking my English, and one of the things you had to do was do these you had to speak in front of people, speak in front of the group. I got so scared of it, I actually started skipping college. And what happened, this is quite funny, what happened was I got a piece of paper and I wrote on it, tell Dad that I'm anxious, and this is interesting, I got these internal burp things again. I've always said, when you talk about something, for me, when you get these internal burps, you're releasing something. it's almost like the energy's flowing, and it's like the burps are like a blockage, these internal burps or something. So what happened was, I wrote this note saying, tell Dad that I've been skipping college because of anxiety, and I put it on the floor in my bedroom, and it was there for ages, and I never told my dad. But I think what was happening was, I had wrote it and put it on the floor for my dad to see it. In other words, I think I couldn't tell my dad, but I knew that he would come into the room and see this. So it was actually my dad that helped me, because he's helped me go to art therapy, that's what actually started me drawing Formula 1 cars when I was little. Well, I wasn't little, I was about 17, 18, something like that. And 1999, I feel like I was in balance for like the first time ever. And then I went to uni, and somehow I just got back into like this social anxiety thing again. Because again, what's probably happened is I hadn't fully healed the wound. I had like cut the flower off. So when I went to uni, the flower grew again, the anxiety flower. And the thing is, the thing is quite annoying, I'm still dealing with the same issues that I had as a child. So that's like 30 years or something. Well, yeah. Actually, this year is going to be 30 years since I got strangled. It's my 30-year anniversary. Woohoo! It'll be quite a nice year to sort of pull the roots out, I think. And then the other thing I've put is it possible that these thoughts that, in other words, you're having a conversation with somebody, because I'm sure, I want to know, does everybody get these thoughts? Like, it can't just be me that's experiencing this. So like, if you're having a conversation with somebody and a thought comes in, like you might even have a thought come in that it's not even that. You might be walking down the street and there's like a fat lady walking past you, and what happens is a thought pops in your head, like saying fat, even though you don't think that person is fat. What I'm thinking is it possible that the person thinks they're fat, so the person is like projecting a fat thought into the environment? So it's almost like maybe what's happening is it's like some sort of telepathic thing, where when you're in this conversation, what if you're actually picking up people's thoughts? So if you do look at them a bit funny, maybe they think, Sophie looked at me a bit funny then, and that's what creates a thought in my head, that comes into my head. That's just another thing I was thinking. I don't know. Yeah. So the other thing I've put, work hard to avoid feeling anxious. That's quite interesting, that is. Because what happened was, yesterday, I have to use a phone to log off, because I have to clock on and off. So somebody was on the phone, I couldn't get to the phone, so I was like sat in the warehouse for like 15 minutes. I didn't know what to do with myself. People kept coming in and out, and I thought, they're looking at me thinking, like, in other words, it was a thought overload in that moment, and I got it was horrible, it was. I kept my composure though, and I said bye to everybody, but as soon as I come out, I could feel it, and I just started crying, and I was trying to work out why did I have such an extreme reaction to that moment, because it doesn't even matter, like, if somebody's on the phone, it doesn't matter, I'll be 10-15 minutes getting out, so it doesn't matter. And it wasn't about the phone, it was about me feeling anxious in that situation. So what I did was, I actually got my phone, and I was like messing around on my phone, again as a form of distraction. I was trying to not feel this anxiety feeling, and so I started using my phone. But what happened was somehow it just got. I couldn't even distract myself with the phone. I suppose what had happened was I'd sort of locked onto the thoughts. So then I was trying to sort of, when I was walking home, I was trying to work out what was happening. And one of the thoughts that popped into my head was, I was feeling angry because the person was on the phone, which I know is a bit sort of silly, but also I think I shouldn't. It is alright to feel angry, I think, but also I think there was no need to feel angry. But what was happening was I cried. I think I was crying because the situation was making me feel angry. And I think to myself, angry is negative. So I didn't want to be feeling negative, I suppose. But really, why did it make me feel angry? It made me feel, because my mind started going all over the place. I started thinking, like the bloke on the phone, he knew that I needed to use the phone. So then the thought started saying, he obviously doesn't value you, otherwise he would put the phone down to let you clock off. So what was happening was, all of a sudden there was just this bombardment of thoughts trying to create this sort of negative experience, I suppose. So it was mad, it was. And that's basically what really brought this podcast together. Because I thought to myself, and I've had this before, that's another thing, see, I thought I'd got, sometimes I think I'm better than I am in like conversations or something, but what's actually happened is, again, it's that thing, I haven't got to the root of it. So in other words, like, 'cause what happens is, well, the other thing, this is so complicated, because there is nothing wrong with being somebody who doesn't talk much. There's nothing wrong with that. In actual fact, I'm fine with that. But what happens is, my mind says, you should be talking more. So then I start thinking, well, I've got to start talking more, when I don't actually really want to talk. So what I should do is I should just be alright. In other words, if I want to talk, I would like to be able to talk. If I don't want to talk, I should be alright to not talk. And because I think to myself, does everyone at work think, I wish Sophie talked more or something? Or does everyone think, it doesn't matter, does it? Like, it's very psychological. It is all very psychological. It's very interesting though. So I'm just going to keep trying to, because what they say is, when you're meditating, you're meditating, what happens is, these thoughts come in, and very often you're meditating, and before you know it, you've gone off into like a story. The thought has grabbed hold of you, and instead of being like just meditating and sort of silent, what's happened is you've gone off onto like a little story with the thoughts, and you suddenly think, wait a minute, I was supposed to be centered myself. So you sort of detach from the thought, and then what happens is 5 minutes later you're off again like that. So what I'm noticing is the same thing's happening. It's the same thing happening all the time. This is why I think meditation is so brilliant, because what happens is, I'm wondering whether the whole of life is based around this sort of thing where you've got your awareness, like, what it is what is like, every belief and stuff is based around where you're putting your focus. This is also why I love lucid dreaming, because like, you're lucid, but if you don't stay focused on being lucid, you'll just get lost in another dream. And it's the same thing. the dream realm, meditation and the waking state, they're all following this same, I would call it like a principle of like your awareness. Like, so the thing is, I know that I've got complete control about where my focus goes. But again, what it is these thoughts are they're like a force. So like, let's say you've got like a little river. If you've got a big massive river, that little river is just going to get like thrown off the thing. So that's how I see it. Like, some of these thoughts are just so massive. You might be able to realise that it's not something you should be focusing on, but it gets a hold of you. So that's what happened yesterday when I was at work. What happened was the thought just got hold of me, really, which is negative, but it's also positive. Yeah, because it allowed me to see what's happening. So that's it. I think that's it for this one. I do hope you enjoyed this one. It went a lot longer than I thought it was going to go. And also, I want to say that it's a little bit confusing. It might seem, I do wonder sometimes whether it seems like you're going mad. I don't think you are. What's happening is you're seeing through the illusion. You're seeing what's happening. So the other thing that happens is, as you start seeing what's happening, the thoughts, even though the thoughts are even then coming in to try and make you think that you're going mad or something. You see what I mean? It gets mental, it does. So like, what happens then is you can then start thinking, well, I better not start trying to work on this because I'm going to go nuts or something. You see what I mean? But that's actually stopping you from focusing on the thing. It's clever. It is clever, but I want to know what these thoughts are. For me, it's either thoughts from your childhood which you didn't realise and they've like stuck around. It's thoughts from the environment which are coming in from other people. It's thoughts from, I would say, like spirits. Because what it might be is, it might be that you've got like a spirit attached to you or something, and this spirit's like following you around, and the spirit wants you to feel anxious. So it throws these thoughts at you because it knows that that's what's going to create anxiety. So it's like the spirit is sort of, it's like feeding off of you feeling anxious. Now, what I love about that is a brilliant visual representation of it. So what I'm saying is, if I can remember this, it'd be cool. Next time I'm in a conversation and the thought comes in, so I start trying to distract me, if I can think to myself, if I can visualise that thought as like some sort of monster that's trying to sort of eat my anxiety, it's trying to make me feel anxious. If I can do that, I can say, hey, I'm not having that. In other words, if I turn the thought into a monster, like a scary monster, which is trying to make me feel bad, I can just say, no, I'm not having that. But I don't know. Because even that is doing what I said earlier. Even by doing that, you're still creating, I don't know how. This is why it's so confusing, and I've been like this for quite a while now. I don't know what to do, because I can sit here and say, when I'm having a conversation, I'm going to focus on the conversation, but it's not that easy, because the thought comes in saying horrible things. Like it's just saying stuff like they don't want to talk to you, they think you're boring, they think this and that. So, like, you're trying to have a conversation and you've got this thing saying all this stuff. So, I don't know, it's weird. lilDENNiS, though, he's boing! it's definitely game over on this one. But I think the plot thickens. So I don't know really what the best... What I'm going to do. Well, I do know. I'm going to keep writing about it. But I think for me, I want to go and I want to try to remember what I was like before I got strangled. In other words, was I scared of people before that? And I can remember before I got strangled, I was like sort of off the rails. Yeah, I had a group of friends. I was shy, but I could have conversations. I wasn't aware of other people, basically. If I was having a conversation with people, it's almost as if what happened is, it felt like what happened was, it was just me and the person. And like, it's almost like the spotlight went on me and the person, and everybody else vanished. Whereas now, if I'm having a conversation with somebody, it's almost like the spotlights are going on other people. To see, so in other words, I'm sort of thinking, yeah, so that's quite important to think about, I think. That's it though. I hope you got something out of this. I've got a beautiful little quote, and it comes from me. So I made this quote myself a few years ago, and I can't help but feel that everything comes back to this. Be nice and do your best. That's all you got to do, really. Be nice and do your best. Be nice to yourself. Be nice to other people. Do your best. If you have a conversation with somebody and these thoughts come in and they'll get distracted by it, well, that's my best at the minute. Yeah, that's it, isn't it? So this week's inspirational quote: be nice and do your best. Oh, matron.